So thank you, Kelly, and I'm so excited to be here with Mark today. And for me personally, Mark, combining my passion of fast cars and risk management, I couldn't think of a better person to talk to about thinking about how risk management in Formula One really translates into the business and corporate world,
Mhm.
and what can we learn from doing that. So I guess this year has been quite amazing, as we know in F1. It's only two races in,
Yeah,
and being an Australian that I am with a Pommy accent, we've had Oscar the Aussie not even start a race. We've had McLaren last week, no car was on the track. We've had all sorts of dramas, and then just recently we've had the Bahrain and the Saudi F1s cancelled. Talk about risk. I think they did it particularly for this chat that I've
I
got with
think,
you, so we've got so much ammunition.
yeah,
I'd love you to just give us a little bit of background that you've had in F1 and focus on risk management, particularly over the journey you've had, I think, back from 1983,
mhm,
in terms of what has changed in F1 risk management.
mhm.
Where was it? Where's it come to now? And I'd love to then think about how that relates to the kind of corporate world once you've maybe given us a little bit of an insight of your journey.
Good pleasure. Great to be able to have this chat with you, David. And you're right, this 2026 Formula One season started with some pretty extraordinary occurrences. We've had Oscar Piastri crash before even the start of the Australian Grand Prix, then both the McLaren cars missing the Chinese Grand Prix. And as you say, we've had a couple of race cancellations. And this is kind of, I think, scripted exactly for our conversation today because risk is so central to Formula One and risk and effective risk management. And if you sat down and you talk to Formula One as a world championship and you talk to individual teams about risk, the things that we have seen in the last few weeks are a good example of what's on our risk register. So we've had a major change to compliance, huge change of regulations. That change to regulations has led to a whole new set of innovations and technology in Formula One. And with new innovation and technology and new regulations, you get risk because people are unprepared for what might happen. So, if you like, our understanding of the risks has weakened because we're in a completely new chapter
So
of,
something you said then, risk register, got me very excited.
yeah,
And a lot of our corporate and business clients rely on the risk register.
yeah,
I'd love to have an idea of what I would find if, assuming you
yeah,
have one,
yeah.
on the F1 risk register.
So
What does it look like?
of course it depends which business you're talking about. So if you're talking about Formula One as a world championship, so Formula One is a company. There's a Formula One company. So when you talk to Formula One and you say what's on your risk register, they look at the requirement to stage a world championship. So they look at global risks. They look at geopolitical risks. They look at weather risks. In the last 10 to 12 years, we've had Formula One events cancelled because of weather events, flooding, serious flooding in Italy that led to the cancellation of a race. Um, we've had a couple of pandemics. We had the SARS outbreak in Asia over a decade ago. That impacted on us quite significantly. Obviously, the COVID pandemic had a major impact on Formula One, really profound one. We had an entire quarter where there was no revenue in Formula One because we couldn't have races anywhere in the world. And of course, you have geopolitical issues. You mentioned the fact that the Saudi and Bahrain Grand Prix this year have been cancelled. They've been cancelled because of war, because of conflict in the Middle East. But that's not the first time we've had to deal with conflict in recent years because we also had to cancel the Russian Grand Prix because of the invasion of Ukraine and the outbreak of war between Russia and Ukraine. So when you talk to Formula One about what's on their risk register, it's really quite big stuff that they're concerned about. And that means they have to have plans based around all of these potential events occurring. And by the way, they now have enough data around past events to be able to plan future outcomes because they know that sooner or later these things are going to happen. Then, if you look at the risk register for an individual Formula One team, like McLaren, let's say, they're thinking about the things like logistics, transporting the cars and equipment all around the world, getting people to races. Then you're looking at the sport, the actual racing itself. So the risk register within Formula One motor racing is quite extensive because it starts with anything that's going to compromise safety, anything that's going to compromise reliability or quality of outcomes. And of course, Formula One is inherently dangerous. Okay, so risk is all around us in Formula One. We have 22 men, as it so happens, men still dominate Formula One, but 22 men racing these machines at up to 350 kilometers per hour. The risks are pretty obvious. We have to manage all of them. So the risk register within F1 teams is quite extensive and goes through all our day-to-day operations, our commercial side, and of course the car racing itself.
And in many ways, I guess maybe we'll do it one day, is compare and just have a look at it.
Yeah,
Because what we've really found, I guess, in our world, with all the different business areas and clients we work with, is that ends up being kind of a standard risk register at, say, board level.
yeah,
We like to call it the risk taxonomy. And it typically has about 15 risks at board level.
yeah,
Strategic, which would be the big
yeah,
change
yeah,
risks. We then go through the cyber risk, which you would have. We have the
yeah,
WHS, and I'm sure
yeah,
there's quite similar. And we often find risk
100%.
is risk is risk. And then the drilling down of those to more granular levels as it goes all the way down to the track, if I
Yeah,
say that,
yeah,
where you've got then the detail.
yeah.
I guess the key is bringing that all together so that the F1 team as a whole has got a good view of risk. And I guess for us as a firm, we focus on the word enterprise risk management, enterprise, which
Yeah,
looks at all risk in
yeah,
a similar way. And I'm sure there's a lot of similarity. Now, one of the things you mentioned earlier was this year a huge change in regulations. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, I'm sure it's happened once or twice before, but it's a big one. And if I look at regulations, we've had things like sustainability or using sustainable fuel. So the E in ESG, environment, which is great to see.
yeah,
We've seen the shift to more electric power, more 50-50 and so on. We've had rules around safety, but we've also had a change of rules that maybe focus not so much on environment or safety, but also competitiveness and spectator enjoyment about
yeah,
more overtaking.
yeah.
I'd love to get your view in F1 as to how compliance regulation and risk management go together. Are they a marriage made in heaven or a marriage made in hell?
It's a marriage made in heaven because when I started working in Formula One over 40 years ago, the Formula One as an industry had a combative relationship with the regulator. So there was a lot of conflict with the regulator. Really, the last 25, 30 years have been about working with the regulator because ultimately we see compliance as being something that's very helpful for us. It gives us a set of, if you like, rules and regulations, but also boundaries within which we as an industry have to operate. And the prime reason why our regulator creates so many regulations for us, technical regulations, sporting regulations, financial regulations, is to protect us from risk. So risk is at the heart of our regulatory environment, and no one in Formula One is going to argue with you over the need to manage risk as effectively as possible because unfortunately, as an industry, we have seen only too well what happens when you don't put risk at the center of your operations. And unfortunately, in our sport, between 1950 and 1994, we had over 40 Formula One drivers killed. That would seem unthinkable today, but for 4.5 decades, that's the way our industry worked. And people talked about risk and people talked about safety, but there was a kind of metaphoric shrug about the fact that, well, it's a risky business, so sooner or later we'll just be a little bit unlucky. Well, from 1994 onwards, that totally changed. We had a double fatality at a race, and after that double fatality, we sat down with the regulator and we said, with the regulator, how can we together work to create a framework in which we can put risk management at the center of our day to day operations and prevent any further catastrophic outcomes? And the result is that in the last 31 years, we've only had one further driver fatality. One too many, but a massive change from what we had before.
That is music to our ears. I mean, we talk about, I mentioned enterprise risk management. We
Yeah,
also use the acronym GRC, governance, risk,
yeah,
compliance,
yeah,
and the RC are right next to each other.
yeah,
And that's exactly what they
yeah,
should be.
yeah,
So I guess we as a firm see very much about compliance is a risk management issue.
yeah,
And if compliance and regulations are good, they are there to protect stakeholders,
Yeah.
drivers, the
Yeah.
public
Yeah.
from risk. So the two should go hand in hand, which is absolutely wonderful to
Yeah.
think. Now, I think I know the answer to this one, but I'd love to just get your thoughts, given what you just said, is that one of the, I guess, challenges in our world with some organisations is to see the value of risk management. You know, you go, oh, you got to do your risk management. Oh God, do I really have to do this? Yes. Oh, it's just an overhead. It's avoiding me having fun. It's doing this. It's just an impost. Where this then creates risk management, compliance management as a hindrance, not an enabler.
Yeah.
So in F1, is risk management seen as a hindrance or an enabler?
It's an enabler. And if I can just share with you for a moment a really important step on our journey. We we have a saying in Formula One: if you think safety and risk management are expensive, try having an accident
Yeah.
or an incident.
Yeah.
And the I think a lot of people listening to this conversation will have heard of Ayrton Senna. He was the preeminent driver of his day. He was the Max Verstappen or the Lewis Hamilton of the 1980s and early 90s. I had the privilege of working with him, and he lost his life on May the 1st, 1994. His loss of life, first of all, there was a human tragedy. Then there was a reputational damage to the Williams Formula One team because it was suspected that their car had failed. So it was poor engineering. The Williams team is called Williams Grand Prix Engineering. They pride themselves on engineering, and this was an engineering failure, it looked like. Then there was a financial cost, and there was a criminal trial, and that criminal trial lasted for 13 years until 2007. And if you talk to any of the directors of the Williams Formula One team from that time, they will tell you that it overshadowed their entire career, the fact that that's what happened. So the reality is that the costs of getting it wrong are really significant on so many levels. And then you come to the fact that in Formula One, we work to aerospace engineering standards. And the reason we work to aerospace engineering standards, not to automotive engineering standards, is because when we look at risk in transport, the least risky form of transport is aviation. So as a result, we build everything in terms of how you best manage risk. So we want a Formula One car to be as risk averse as an Airbus A350 or a Boeing 737. We want certainty over the engineering. And the way to do that is to embrace risk, to fully understand what the risks are inherent in what you're doing, and create an incredibly robust, resilient environment that's prepared for whatever eventuality is going to hit you. And the result is we have certainty over outcomes. And the final thing I'll say to you on this point is that because we've gone on that journey, we have then realized that, contrary to what so many people think, when you have really strong approach to risk management, a really effective approach to managing risk, it gives you the capability to build performance hand in glove with that. So suddenly you can actually dramatically transform your performance as a business because you've got a handle on the risks and you've got confidence about the future.
Yeah, fantastic. There's some wonderful quotes there. So just, I'd like to kind of move a little bit into chatting with you about decision making, of which there must be hundreds and thousands in F1 as there are in any business.
Yeah.
Before I do that, just one final comment in terms of going back to, dare I say, the sad days, particularly Senna, and perhaps risk management wasn't considered that important back then, or it wasn't done well, to where it is at the moment.
Yeah.
What level of maturity journey do you think you've gone over in your career? Where did it start? Where is it now? And where's it got to go? Just in a couple of sentences.
I could get quite philosophical at this point because actually, when we look at the bad old days, Formula One was a male dominated sport full of testosterone charged guys going car racing and taking risks. And actually, the risks were somehow part of the enjoyment. But the problem is the risk management was ineffective. And the result is that we constantly had tragedies. Our industry has grown up. Today, we have a much better gender balanced environment. Interestingly, the more senior women we've had working in our teams, the more our risk management has become effective. Read into that what you may, but the fact is we are so much more mature as organizations. We have a much better balanced organizations. And so I mean, one of the privileges I have of having had a long career in Formula One is I've seen the transformation.
Mm.
And Formula One today is populated by experts in their field who take their job very seriously in terms of driving high performance outcomes by managing the risk at every level as effectively as possible. And we do that with military precision. It's all about guaranteeing uh, resilient, strong, robust systems and processes, which then generate high performance outcomes. So the maturity of Formula One today compared to the bad old days
Yeah.
is quite something to
And
behold.
it's interesting that in the world that we live in with business and so on, we've had the same journey. Protec was founded in 1999,
Yeah,
and it was a bit of the Wild West back then. It was early days of risk management, and I honestly thought when I was one of the founders of Protec, I'd be retired on the beach in 10 years. It never happened because the maturity has just gone on massively, and as
yeah,
to what we're going to see going forward is amazing.
yeah,
So I think sometimes people get a bit down on risk management isn't good enough. But if you compare it to what it was and the journey we've been on the last 25 years has been absolutely incredible. And I think for me personally, the parallel I have in my personal life, I used to do a lot of hang gliding in the 80s,
okay,
at the end of the 80s, and people were dying regularly. You'd have a couple of hang glider pilots in Australia die every month.
yeah,
You almost never hear of a hang glider pilot dying. Why? Formula One, exactly the same. Risk management is taken absolutely seriously,
yeah,
and you almost never see people do that. So
yeah,
the focus for us as a firm is very much about risk management is there for sustainable reward. You
yeah,
want to get reward, you want to achieve your objectives, but you want to do it sustainably and not have all these hiccups that happen. Which brings me to the value of risk management in the sense of what value does it bring an organization and how do you promote that to get everybody behind it? So everybody in the F1 team absolutely loves risk management, which it sounds like they do. And a lot of that to do is, in my view, has to do with decision making. If we can use risk management to make better decisions,
yeah,
then we've added huge value, not just looking out the rear view mirror, but we truly are looking forward. So my interest here would be initially in a F1 team, kind of who makes the decisions because
yeah,
they've got to be made at incredible speed, some of them
yeah,
not. You've got the
yeah,
more strategic ones. So what is the kind of hierarchy of decision making and who is allowed to challenge the decision?
yeah,
We saw that with Lewis Hamilton in Melbourne going,
yeah,
I think I should have boxed or pitted and
yeah,
you didn't do it. What does that look like? And I think the other one is kind of if something kind of goes wrong, what's the culture like
yeah,
in
sure.
terms of, is it you, your fault?
Yeah.
No, you made a mistake. What's it
Well,
look like?
so first thing to say is that if you take a team like Red Bull Racing, where I was on the management board, Red Bull today employs almost 2,000 full-time staff. Less than 10% of the staff travel to the races, so 90% of the people work in a technology campus.
Wow.
And so in a 2,000 strong team, you've got a lot of people in there, you've got a lot of different functions, roles, departments. Um, Risk is not managed by some department down the corridor in an office by a head of risk management. Risk is something that is managed across the whole business. So we have very clear roles and responsibilities across the business. With your role as a manager, you have responsibility over your day-to-day decision making, including not just driving successful outcomes, but also managing risk. So you are empowered at an individual level to take responsibility for the decisions that you're making. And so risk management is embedded within the day-to-day management remit for anyone working within a Formula One team. And in terms of therefore the speed of decision making, because you mentioned about the split second timing. So we have clear roles and responsibilities. We have a very strong approach to looking forward in terms of simulating what may happen, looking at past data to think about future outcomes, and we plan for every eventuality. And so whenever people see us make a fast decision during a race and they say, wow, that was a really quick decision, that quick decision is based on a plan. So we have a plan as to what to do in any scenario. And therefore the decision becomes, first of all, clear what the decision is. instantaneous. There's no debate. You're not hesitating, and the person making the decision knows that they are empowered to make that decision. There's no need to have a debate. You don't have to have a committee meeting.
Yeah.
Person makes a
Yeah.
decision and they stand over that. And obviously, I mean, it happens in every industry, in every business. Formula One's the same. From time to time, people will make mistakes. And when they make a mistake and when we get it wrong, we sit down and we analyze that and we have an honest, open, transparent conversation about what went wrong, how can we learn from that, and then we embed that learning into our future planning
Yeah.
so that we don't repeat the same mistake. So Formula One is a supercharged version of continuous improvement. We are obsessed with continuous improvement. So we're constantly analyzing the data, reviewing how we did, what we can learn from that, implementing improvements, and then going again. So it's a constant cycle of learning and improvement. And you mentioned the cultural aspect of our teams. It will not be a surprise for you to learn that in Formula One teams we try to eradicate blame culture. Blame culture,
Love it. Yeah.
blame culture doesn't blaming people doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah.
It actually creates fear.
And it
I,
also creates hidden spots, dark spots, because people won't call it out if they know they're going to get blamed. So you actually don't know about it.
100%. I mean, arguably arguably the most famous Formula One team is Ferrari, and Ferrari haven't won the Formula One World Championship now for almost 20 years, 19 years.
Yeah.
And interestingly, their chief executive, 4 years ago, gave an interview for the BBC, and he was asked by the BBC, why does Ferrari never win the Formula One World Championship? And he said, unfortunately, we have a cultural issue. And he said,
Wow.
our cultural issue is we have a tendency towards blame. And he said, because we blame each other, people minimize their contribution instead of maximizing. So in other words,
That's awesome. Yeah.
keep your head down,
Yeah.
keep your head down, and don't be brave about making decisions. Well, all that does is it guarantees that you're never going to make the winning outcome because you're minimizing instead of maximizing your contribution. Meanwhile, in a team like Red Bull, you know, they've won 14 Formula One World Championships in the last 20 years because Red Bull's approach is let's be open, let's be honest, let's take some risks, but take risks in a calculated way. And by the way, if someone makes a mistake, let's just learn from it. Let's support them. So we have a supportive environment where people are unafraid and where you have deep psychological safety. And of course, psychological safety for us is very much at the core of how a team avoids blame culture and just keeps learning, keeps improving, and ultimately drives better outcomes.
It's something we focus heavily on, and that is risk culture. And we talk about, risk culture. What does that kind of mean? And a big part of it is exactly what you said, that people feel safe calling out problems. They feel
Yeah,
safe
yeah,
speaking up. They feel protected as long as they're working with inside their risk appetite, that they
yeah,
haven't gone over. They don't deliberately mess up. They don't negligently mess up.
yeah,
And if they feel that they're doing the right thing within the process, then they feel protected, psychological safety. They're going to be brave. I love that comment you made. They're willing to be brave, and you need to be brave, but you need to be protected if you mess up.
yeah,
So I think the overlap between us as a firm who focuses heavily on technology, we have our project ERM system. It also goes hand in hand with culture. You can't have one without the other. They have to work hand in hand. So maybe just focusing on the kind of information required to make good decisions. We were talking earlier, and you made the comment, I think not exactly right, but kind of data is king. I'd love to hear your
yeah,
words about the use of data in
yeah,
F1 risk management. And also, I believe you did briefly mention to me earlier about potentially simulations
yeah,
around issues that the teams could run 2.5 to 3 million simulations on
yeah,
things that could go wrong
yeah,
and kind of model all of them. I'd love to hear a bit more about that, because that is music to a lot of people's ears, yet to find out
yeah.
exactly how to do that. But data and simulations.
Yeah. So Formula One is 76 years old, started in 1950. Incredibly, from about 1985 onwards, we fell in love with data in some way, shape, or form. So we started using microprocessors in Formula One in about the mid 1980s. by the early 1990s, we were gathering information from the car by putting sensors on things. So steering input, brakes, brake input, engines, gearboxes. Uh, Fast forward to today, a Formula One car today will have around about 300 sensors on the car, and those sensors are monitoring anything that is moving, vibrating, anything with a temperature, anything that's rotating, anything with a pressure in it, like fuel pressure or hydraulic pressure, and of course everything the driver is doing. So we've got, and we can have as many sensors as we want, but the average is 300 to 350, and those sensors are relaying data to us real time. We get about 4 terabytes of data per weekend coming from the car, so
Wow.
quite a lot of information, and that data is being relayed to data analysts trackside. So we have a group of 8 to 10 data analysts trackside. But where the really cool stuff happens is that all the data from both our cars, because each team has 2 Formula 1 cars, all of our data is then relayed to our headquarters. And we make all of our key risk decisions at headquarters. So
Wow.
we run the race remotely. So if you came with me to Red Bull's campus in Milton Keynes in England, which is about 1 hour north of London, I could take you into the mission control room, and in mission control, we run the race in Shanghai or Melbourne or Montreal. And the reason we're doing that is that the people at the racetrack are literally too close to it. They get
Yeah.
emotional,
Yeah.
they make poor decisions, they get they get impacted by the environment that they're in. So back in mission control, we are able to see the data from both our cars. We can see the publicly available data from our competitors. We are running real time analytics, predictive analytics. We have software which essentially helps us to strategize what's about to happen, so we can deal with any scenario. And that's where the call is made. Someone said to me recently, what about the delay? If you're in racing in Melbourne, how long does it take for the data to arrive, to the team in the UK and mission control? So last year the average was 43 milliseconds. Um, you don't notice it. It's
Yeah.
not an issue.
Yeah.
So we are managing the race remotely, and it's a uh, data is the fuel of Formula One.
Yeah.
It's what fuels how we operate as businesses.
Yeah.
We measure everything, we monitor everything, we plan our future. And you mentioned the simulations that we do. So for an average Formula One race, Red Bull Racing runs 2.5 to 3 million race simulations per week. Now, what do we do in those simulations? Well, what we're doing is we're looking at every potential scenario.
Mhm.
We are specifically imagining, not just imagining, but we are focusing on what the risks are and what could happen. And the result of that, David, is that when Red Bull Racing goes into a race weekend, we don't we don't hope about the outcome. We know what the outcome will be. We have confidence in the outcome.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes that means we will go to a race knowing we will win. Other weekends, we will go to a race knowing that victory may not be possible, in which case our objective is to finish second or third and to be on the podium. But the point is, we have knowledge
Yeah.
over what the outcome can be, and we can optimize that. So our simulation environment is all about helping us to manage future outcomes,
Yeah.
manage the risks, and drive optimal performance. And that's why data has become so important
And you
to us.
see the potential value of that in a business environment to run those kind of
Yeah,
simulations. The complexity is going to be interesting, and the data points and the sensors that we like to call them key risk indicators,
yeah,
where we got to collect this data, but we don't have digital
yeah,
sensors everywhere. It's
yeah,
coming.
yeah,
See with what we can do, really powerful. Now, one of the comments you made, just to finish off thinking about decision making, is you use the word predictive analytics. I kind
yeah,
of love that, because I think a lot of the time risk information can be backward looking, and you kind of
yeah,
go, I squashed a cat. Well, yes,
yeah,
I know you did, but
yeah.
you're not gonna, how are you going to save another one? So how do you use the data to be predictive, and what do you do when you then see something you're not happy with?
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you just go, oh well, this is going to happen, bang, it's happened? How do you act on it? How do you make a decision based on those predictive analytics to become more proactive rather than reactive?
So I'm going to name drop now. So a good friend of mine is David Coulthard, who drove in Formula One for 15 years for the Williams, McLaren, and Red Bull teams. And David, if he was sitting here chatting to us, he would tell you that as a Formula One driver, he's risk averse, and that the way to manage risk is not to look in the rear view mirror about what's happening behind, but to look straight ahead and to plot the future. And the benefit of our analytics environment is we can use trend analysis and lots of techniques to basically see what's coming over the horizon. We have again, going back to our point around psychological safety, we are unafraid to embrace the risks. What are the risks? How do we understand them? How do we predict that? So when we go into a race, we have strategies based on all kinds of different scenarios. And the point is that by having certainty over future outcomes, we can go into any race with a high degree of confidence, because we literally have had those honest, sort of robust conversations about what the future may hold. So from whether it's a Formula One driver perspective, Formula One team perspective, this ability to effectively predict outcomes is so important to us. And then the second part of your question, during a Formula One race, things always evolve. Something's always happening. It's a very dynamic environment. The moment the race starts, things change. There's that famous saying about, in the military world, no strategy survives first contact with the enemy. So
Yes.
it's the same in Formula One. The moment the race starts, the competition does something unexpected, or the weather changes, or this some event. So you have to be prepared for all those scenarios. But the benefit of having our predictive analytics at work for us is that sometimes we can see things develop to a point where risks are escalating, and we may have to call a halt to operations. So if we see a catastrophic failure is going to occur, we don't wait for the catastrophic failure. We call a halt to operations. And if anyone who follows Formula One will know that from time to time you might hear an engineer radio a driver and say, sorry, you're going to have to stop the car. Driver doesn't understand why. He says, car seems fine.
Yep.
The problem is we've got the data showing us that the car is not going to be fine
Yep.
in 1 lap or 3 laps. And there's no point, first of all, destroying the car, destroying the systems, risking life and limb.
Yep.
So actually we can do something about it. And Formula One's approach to risk management these days is all about predicting what's going to happen, mitigating risk, making sure that risks do not escalate. So if you think about the fact that during a Formula One race, if something happens on track, we can deploy the safety car. Now, the safety car could easily be called the risk management car.
Yes.
Okay, but we call it the safety car. But the purpose of the safety car is to mitigate risk at crucial points during the race. So the answer to your question is we don't wait for things to go wrong.
Yeah, beautiful.
We deal with them. We meet them head on. We predict those outcomes, and we make decisions accordingly to protect ourselves and to protect our business.
So again, I mean, one of the things we do a lot in risk management is key risk indicators or risk indicators, and they're incredibly powerful if you create a good suite of them. What's a good suite of indicators? Leading indicators. So many people track lagging indicators. How many customer complaints? How many trade errors have you done? And you go, yeah, it's already happened. But let's go forward in the risk journey and go, what are all the leading indicators? Now, when you build that, you move to now prevention rather than cure. You move to proactive rather than reactive, but you also create a perception problem. And I want to throw this at you is if you're a risk manager and you see something that's going to go wrong and you say stop, and you stop everything, people are really upset because it stopped them having fun and doing another sale. And then obviously nothing goes wrong because you stopped it going wrong. And they turn around to you and go, it wouldn't have gone wrong anyway. And as a risk manager, I feel you can't win, because if something goes wrong, you should have stopped it. And if it doesn't go wrong, it wouldn't have gone wrong anyway. So why justify how do you overcome that perception issue? Do you have to take people through the journey of knowledge and understanding that this is what you're doing, and show them a simulation as if you didn't stop them?
Yeah.
This is what would have happened. How do you overcome that?
Yeah. So this is such an important point because you're quite right. As Formula One has become much better at mastering risk, we sometimes get accused of being too risk averse.
Yeah,
And sorry to be a little bit blunt when I say this, but we end up saying to people, well, how much catastrophe would you like?
yeah,
Would you like a little bit of catastrophe or a little bit of death? Or do you want none? And the answer is no one wants catastrophic outcomes.
yeah,
So our job as risk managers is to make sure that we protect our business and our people, and we can justify those decisions
yeah,
because we have the data. We also have our corporate memory. Corporate memory is a
yes,
very important thing. So within Formula One, one of our challenges today in 2026 is that younger people, particularly in our industry, will say to me, why are we so risk averse?
yeah,
And I have to take them on a journey and educate them
yeah,
that when we were bad at this, when we didn't take risk management seriously, these are the outcomes.
yeah,
I went to the funerals,
yeah,
So the reality is we have come a long way as an industry. And I know I'm literally talking about life and death, but this is risk in its most visceral.
absolutely.
This is risk in its most visceral form.
Yeah,
And of course, going back to our very early point in the conversation, there are lots of things on our risk register. And so we've become very good at managing risk. We've also become very good at managing commercial risk
yeah,
within Formula One. Our industry is much more robust today because we've learned how to manage risk. You also touched on cyber risk, for example, earlier on. So cybersecurity is one of the major topics for us in terms of our risk register. Interestingly, the biggest financial penalty in sporting history was in Formula One due to cybercrime. It was a $100 million US fine for a team due to
wow,
theft of data from a competitor. So cybersecurity, cybercrime, really big topic for us. So the reality is that this is not a nice to have;
yeah,
it's a must have, and it's actually at the centre of our business operations.
yeah. And it's interesting thinking about this perception of it wouldn't have gone wrong anyway. My head was just going, you've got this simulation capability.
Yeah,
You could then, I guess, take one of the 3 million simulations and go, that was the one.
yeah,
Where if we hadn't have
yeah,
done that,
yeah,
that would have been the
yeah,
result. Because I think one of the issues we find, particularly where we're dealing with, say, financial organisations, where the losses are dollars and cents, or pounds and pennies, rather than maybe life or injury,
yeah,
it's not kind of so emotive, but it should be, because the impact of financial loss to a human can
yeah,
sometimes translate, dare I say, into physical loss.
yeah, yeah,
And so I think people need to see the end result. So to be able to trace through something and go, if you don't do this, this is what could happen. People
yeah,
wake up. In the late 2010, 2008, 2009, 2018, sorry, 2019, we had the financial services inquiry here. And what was incredibly powerful was that they had customers who'd been negatively affected by the bank stand up and give testimony. It was
it was
heartrending and
powerful.
it was palpable, it was
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah,
And so I think we somehow in our world have to take people on that journey. This is the end result. We call them risk consequences, risk impacts,
yeah,
and we want to be able to show that if we don't do this, this is the result. And it is a tough one, but we really need to do it. The other thing that's been really interesting for us over the last 3, 4, 5 years, driven primarily by financial services, is a big focus on the word operational resilience, and we've done a lot of work with it. We have a module in our system on operational resilience,
mhm,
and it really came from the old kind of business continuity planning, where if it hits the fan, hey, we've got a backup, we can go
yeah,
and get
yeah,
rescued.
yeah,
But it's moved much more to resilience, not just being about recovering when you get hit, but being powerful and resistant even when you get hit. So I'm not going to shudder as much. I'm going to avoid a big problem.
yeah,
So if I think about the word reliability, which, I
yeah,
love my cars, as I
yeah,
know you do,
yeah,
a reliable car is everything. When on a Sunday morning you start it, it doesn't start. Oh God. So reliability is everything. However, what and how does reliability and resilience fit together, in the sense that resilience for you guys has to also be what are you going to do when things go horribly wrong?
Yeah,
And we have seen that, not horribly in terms of life, but we've seen it in the season so far in 2026. I mean, some major incidents.
yeah.
Oscar Piastri not even getting on the track in Melbourne, McLaren cars not working. We've had all sorts of drama. What's the plan B, the plan C, the plan D? And
Yeah.
obviously, with Bahrain and Saudi now not going ahead, what's the resilience, and how do you guys look at resilience when things go horribly wrong?
So, so David, one of the really interesting thing is when we bring guests to Formula One events, people who've never been to a Formula One race before, one of the major pieces of feedback that we get is that people notice how calm everyone stays, even when things go wrong. And the reason we're
Nice.
staying calm is we have processes in place to deal with whatever comes over the horizon. So something that looks like a catastrophic event actually for us is just an event that we plan for, and we have inherent resilience as a result. So if there's a reliability issue with the car, we have clear roles and responsibilities in terms of identifying what the reliability issue is, tackling the reliability issue, making sure that we mitigate that or resolve it. If it's something like the conflict in the Middle East, we knew that the Saudi Arabian and Bahrain Grand Prix were at risk
Mm.
a few weeks back, obviously when the conflict started. And we have a plan B for Formula One events. So if a Formula One event is going to be postponed or cancelled, we have to decide where those 600 tons of freight are going to go. The
Yeah.
Formula One World Championship is just like a circus. It moves around the world. So you've got 600 tons of freight. We've got 4 cargo aircraft. So we have a plan B in terms of where that freight goes, how it moves, who's responsible, who makes the decision. We
Yeah.
go back to decision making. Who's going to take the decision? Um, and then obviously the people. So we have 3,000 people who travel to each race. How are those people going to move around the world? So the point is that because of past events like the flooding in Italy that we had, because of the pandemic, because of conflict in Ukraine, guess what? We have a plan. We have a plan for all of those. So for in the future, when something like that happens, when there's another war or conflict or weather event or whatever, we don't have people running around in hysterics wondering what to do. We have a clear plan that kicks into place. And again, it's all dealt with very calmly
Yeah.
because we are experts in our field. And I think this is the thing, David, about risk management, isn't it? If you're good in business, if you whatever business you're in, if you believe that you are really good at what you do as a business, part and parcel of that approach is being really good at managing the risks that are inherent in your business. It's not a surprise when things go wrong because actually we know what the risks are. So why don't you have a plan for that? And I think that's the thing in Formula One, which we have learned, is that instead of hoping
Yeah.
that the risks don't escalate, we know that we need to have a plan in place to deal with them when things do go wrong. And then all of a sudden, things become a lot more easy
Yeah.
because you have a confidence over it and you have that resilience. And to your point, when something goes wrong, instead of us falling apart, we might quiver a little bit, but that's the most. We actually have a plan as to how
Yeah.
to go ahead.
And obviously linked to this is the running of simulations, and you've
Yeah,
spoken that before. Again, one of the things we found of a problem with simulations, and I go back to the traditional simulation of a disaster, and then they, test the BCP,
yeah,
business continuity plan. What would it work like? And of course, you do that, and you have a desktop review and you sit around and go, okay, the building's on fire, what are you going to do? And of course, everybody is not high tension because they know it's not on fire.
yeah,
They're having a coffee while they're chatting and so on. And I've always had the fear that that simulation then doesn't really test much because we haven't got the stress levels and so on. So in terms of a simulation versus real life unfortunately is very expensive,
yeah,
real life incident, but people wake up to it and go, oh my God, this could really happen,
yeah.
or because it has happened. How do you bridge the gap, and how do you get your kind of F1 team members to take the simulation seriously enough to go, we need to act, rather than, oh, it's just a simulation, it won't really happen. And then when it does happen, it's very different. It sounds like the way you approach it is the same, because everybody's calm, because they go, oh, we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'd love to just hear, how do we in business benefit from your experience
Yeah.
in F1, that we can use simulations but get people bought in from their hearts, minds and souls, that this could happen and therefore we need to be ready, and not take it as a little bit of a joke and a bit of fun.
Now, you're something of a Formula One fan, David, and I hate to tell you that we, inside Formula One, we are obsessed with, we don't want any excitement, we don't want any unpredictability, we don't want things to go wrong. So the result is that when simulation technology began to develop, we saw this as a great opportunity for us to look at potential real world scenarios, simulate them, and to build very accurate modeling around how we best manage risk, how we best generate positive outcomes. Now, in practical terms, what this means is that at the beginning of my career in Formula One, if we wanted to test something, we physically tested it in the real world.
Yeah.
And to your exact point, that was expensive.
Yeah.
So we used to build a Formula One car, take it to a track somewhere in the world, put a Formula One driver in it, and then we would drive that car for 25 or 30,000 kilometers of physical testing. It was enormously expensive. It was enormously risky, because if you imagine being a Formula One driver and we put you in the car and we say, oh, today, David, we're testing something, we don't know if it will work.
Yeah.
And you have to put your life on the line. You're doing 300 kilometers an hour, hoping this thing
Yes.
holds together. It was a nightmare what
Yeah.
we used to do. So we don't do 30,000 kilometers of testing anymore. In 2026, the most that a Formula One team will do is about 2,000 kilometers of testing. So somewhere around about 1/15 of what we used to do. And we've replaced physical testing with simulations.
Yeah.
And we've built digital twins of
Yeah.
our product. And and our digital twin is extremely accurate.
Yeah.
And we actually can build a simulator in which the driver goes and drives. People will say it looks like a computer game. It's not a computer game, it's a simulator. It's exactly like an airline pilot learning to fly an Airbus or a Boeing. So we can put the driver in the simulator and we can recreate any scenario. We can show him what happens when it rains, what happens when it's dry, what happens when it's damp, what happens when he has a gearbox failure, what happens when he has an accident. I remember Max Verstappen, I'm going to name drop again, Max Verstappen telling me that he will win the Japanese Grand Prix. And I said, why? And he said, because I always win it in the simulator. So I know I'm going to win it in real life. And I thought, welcome to digital natives. And, Max has grown up in this environment. And sure enough, he won the Japanese Grand Prix. So our simulated environment is really impressive. However, we do see, and we've seen it this year, that when you get major changes to regulation, you get major changes to technology, gremlins can creep in. And McLaren had a particularly embarrassing weekend in China with two electrical failures, neither of which should have happened. My understanding is one was human error. We have a saying in Formula One, when a mechanic bolts something together incorrectly, we call that finger trouble. So we think that one of the issues may have been finger trouble. So someone literally didn't, build that component properly. The other problem was an anomaly. I need to understand that anomaly. But the big point is that when those things occur, so when we go from simulation to real world, and something goes wrong, we want to learn as quickly as possible what occurred, do a robust analysis. Open, honest, transparent, no blame, not interested in blaming. Yeah. If a mechanic did something wrong, we want that mechanic to tell us what he did wrong, and then we'll support him to make sure it doesn't happen again. So again, it's at every level, whether it's in simulations or whether it's in the real world, it's all about us continuously improving outcomes by analyzing the risks and putting in place robust systems to avoid a repetition of any issues that arise.
It's interesting, looking at this year and so many changes, and the teams have had to respond to that with, power
Yeah,
units and
yeah,
shortening the car and the tyres, whatever. In our world, we would call that a kind of strategic change.
yeah,
It's a major change to the operating model. And so, this principle, we have a strategic risk management, which is making sure that we make good strategic decisions
yeah,
for you guys in the context of the regulations until you execute
yeah,
those changes really well, which is like project risk management. And the risk we then run is what we refer to as risk in change, which is when you go and deliver that change into the operating model, into the car, and then you run it on the track,
yeah,
it doesn't work
yeah,
because there's risks you never kind of saw. And I know it's never going to be watertight, but this comment you made about being predictive analytics, the more you can predict how your changes, strategic changes in business are going to impact the day to day, the more prepared you're going to be and the less will go wrong, which is the whole point of risk management.
yeah.
So that parallel, I think, is incredibly strong. So one of the things that I really want to kind of get from you is this issue about the value of risk management. And I really like the view, and I have a very strong view, that with great risk management, you get competitive advantage. And you've spoken about this a fair bit. So the first thing I wanted to mention was that when we talk about risk in the business world, a lot of people see it as just bad. It's negative, it's loss, it's pain, it's suffering, and so on. Yeah, if I look at the ISO 31000 risk management standard, it actually says risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives, and it can be both positive opportunity
Yeah.
and negative threat. And I just wondered if you could just give me a view in the F1 world. If you say the word risk to someone, whoever that might be in the F1 team, do they go, oh, well, that's really bad? Or does some jump to, wow, we've got a great opportunity here?
Yeah.
How is it seen?
Well, it's so this is a very it's a slightly double-sided coin, this one, because risk to us can mean um, making sure that we mitigate any potential negative outcomes. We ensure the car is not just fast but reliable and safe and robust. But risk can also be opportunity. So for you talk about the new regulations that came out in Formula One this year. So we look at the regulations from the new regulations in two ways. So one is these are the regulations. We have to be fully compliant. We have to meet those regulations. The other way we look at the regulations is what do the regulations not say?
Yeah,
Because then there's scope for us to explore
wiggle room.
opportunities.
Yeah,
And this is calculated risk. So this is where we look at an opportunity to explore boundaries, to see where we can take our technology, our systems and processes. And the most successful technical director in Formula One history, Adrian Newey. So he was a technical director at Williams and then McLaren and then Red Bull. So he's won 20 Formula One World Championships or more. If you talk to Adrian, you say, Adrian, what's your what's the reason you're so good at what you do as a business leader, as a technical director? He will say to you, I'm very good at evaluating risk and also deciding what risks are worth taking
brilliant.
in order to exploit opportunities. Now, if you drill a little bit further into that and you say to Adrian, what are you risking the whole business? He'll say, of course I'm not risking the whole business. What we're doing is we're taking a calculated risk in a particular area based on the data to see where we can go to next, where we can innovate, where we can explore opportunity. And if it works, we can scale that. And suddenly we're seeing it being incredibly innovative. But, there's risk and reward is an interesting conversation. There's no reward without taking
Yeah,
a degree of risk.
yeah,
But it's a question of how far do you push that risk.
yes,
So within risk, we see opportunity. So, and it's therefore not a negative thing. It's actually a crucial conversation to be having within our businesses about what risk means to us and how we utilize risk in order to guarantee outcomes and also take advantage of opportunities. And my sort of final point on this, David, is really in Formula One, we see effective risk management as providing a foundation upon which we can build our business performance. And when we put that in place, it gives us a confidence to go to bed every night, safe in the knowledge that our business is well looked after and is robust and can deal with whatever's in front of us.
Yeah. So just when you were talking, one of the very simple approaches to risk reward decision making that we often discuss with clients is using two simple tests: can I, should I? And our can I test is looking at a decision, looking at the amount of risk, calculate the risk, what the risk is, and go, is that within my risk appetite, my allowed level of risk? If it's not, you can't do it. If it is, you can do it.
Yeah,
Once you can do it, you then
yeah,
go, should I do it? And should I do it is when you now bring in the rewards
yeah,
against the risk.
yeah.
I know it's difficult to calculate, but if the rewards are greater than the risk, you should do it. If the rewards are less than the risk, you shouldn't. So we have the can I, should I test. So my last question before we maybe wind up our chat, although I'd love to go for another 3 hours with you, is risk appetite in the
Yeah,
Formula One world. Is it a concept that you recognise as
yeah,
the word risk appetite,
yeah.
and what does it look like, without giving away secrets, from the kind of top down, so that each person, including the chief engineer, knows the amount of risk they can and cannot take?
Well, I'll give you a very practical example. In my team, we were leading a Grand Prix, and we had 3 laps of the race remaining, and our data was telling us that the a particular technical system was at risk of failure. Now, if that failure mode had occurred at the beginning of the race, we would have stopped the car. But we only had 3 laps left to go.
Yeah,
It's 7 or 8 kilometers left, and we could win the race. So I had to make a decision.
yeah,
I had my technical director with me, and we spoke very briefly. We looked at the data, and we said the reward is worth the risk.
nice.
And we both spoke about it afterwards, and we said that in our minds we were very, very clear that this was so you know, can I take this decision? Yes. Should I take it? Absolutely. we
Yeah,
we had confidence,
yeah,
and we won the race.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple thing. It's obviously in business, there's a lot of data to bring
Yeah.
into that, but the principle behind it is quite simple, just so that everybody knows this is the maximum amount you can take, and then, balancing risk reward. So
but
it's similar.
but also, again, this comes back to your preparedness to take responsibility.
Yeah,
As a manager, as a leader, am I prepared to take responsibility for the risk in my business? Am I going to stand over that, including if things go wrong?
yeah,
If that's on my watch, you can't point the finger and blame someone else. You have to take responsibility for that. And this is why it is such an interesting subject. And fundamentally, when people ask me to talk about high performance in Formula One, I always end up talking about risk management, because you can't have one without the other.
yeah. Beautiful. So thinking finally about the, I want to say we have an image crisis in risk management. We used to. A lot of people
Yeah.
go, "Oh, for God, it's not you guys, is it? Is it risk? What are you here for?" Um, to turn the perception that a lot of people have with risk as kind of negative to positive, have it risk management as an enabler, not a hindrance, all those wonderful things. I kind of look back at what Formula One has done to make itself incredibly well accepted, and the numbers have gone through the roof. And obviously, I'm referring to Drive to Survive,
Yeah.
the Netflix series. I
Yeah.
mean, absolute brilliant. I
Yeah.
love the show.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it, and it has opened up the world of Formula One to so many people. And when I was in Melbourne, I would say the male to female audience was about 50-50. It was
Yeah. Okay.
fantastic
Yeah.
to see how many people have got involved.
Yeah.
So you've done it. Not to say Formula One wasn't a good product in the first place, but
Yeah.
for us as risk managers, wouldn't it be great if we could have a Drive to Survive for risk management? This is so corny, but I have to say it. Risks to thrive,
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
or take risks to thrive. And
Yeah.
you've spoken a lot about that. So what I just wondered to kind of finish this off is, what maybe your top 3 takeaways that you've learnt in Formula One about what we've spoken about today, that people may be able to just latch on to and go, I'm going to do something and act on those, maybe put them on a chart on their wall in front of them and go, these are the three things I can act on, the three key takeaways. Throw if there's a couple that you've said that you don't mention, I might throw them in because there's some gold things you've
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
What would they be? What would your top three be?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that I would say is that we have learned in Formula One that you can't have if you're earnest about driving the best performance imaginable in your sector, you have to be serious about embracing risk
Yeah,
in parallel. You can't have one without the other. And we've therefore learned that risk is not an impediment to performance. Risk management is not an impediment. Safety is not an impediment to performance. It's an enabler. So I think that's really the number one takeaway from me.
yeah,
Then the next one is the fact that in order to get people contributing, you've got to eradicate blame culture and make sure that you can have honest, open, transparent conversations about the risks within your business and how your business is performing and what the potential risks in the future are. And the way to do that is to rely on the data. And we have a saying in Formula One, which is the truth is in the data. So we have the truth of the data, and then as people, we need to look at that and say, right, this is where we are. These are the risks. This is how we build robust, reliable systems and processes to manage those risks and ensure best in class performance. And I think the third and the sort of final one that I really was thinking about earlier on today was the fact that within this risk discussion, you have human beings, you have customers, you have staff, you have suppliers, and as people, we've got to have the right culture and behaviour to manage risk. And there's no point in parking risk for someone else to manage. We all have to take a responsibility in dealing with it because it's an imperfect world, and the human nature is imperfect. And so with that, we have to be open and honest about the way in which we deal with it and make sure that you have this psychologically safe environment within which people can be open and honest with each other, and we can share the best information to get the best outcomes.
it's fantastic, and you said most of the ones I had in my head that I got from you, but a couple of ones I wanted to bring at simulations. I just
Yeah,
think the power of
yeah,
simulations and digital twins
yeah,
is so important, and we need to do more in the corporate business world to do that. I think the other one is the power of good risk reward decision making, and
yeah,
the importance of the risk side of information going into decision making is absolutely critical. I also loved the whole predictive nature of what you said about seeing ahead, early warning indicators, making decisions
yeah,
before something goes wrong,
yeah,
and be bold enough to stand behind that decision.
yeah,
And dare I say, show people if we didn't make the decision, this is what is going to happen. And my final one, and you said it a lot today, was everyone's a risk manager.
yeah,
And over the years since Protect's been going now, like 27 odd years, is right at the beginning, we had struggled to knock on doors for them to open. We're risk people. Oh, God, are you? And we might at most get to see the CFO,
yeah,
never see the CEO, they're off doing something. And then we had a setting up of risk specialists. In our world, we call them line two risk specialists, so just a specialist risk group, and we could only see them, and they were the only people that came to training. And now, when we go and train, 99% are non-risk frontline people. So we've turned it around in business, and you have absolutely shown why you turn it around. So that's my kind of final thought with it. Everyone is a risk manager,
yeah,
and it should be embedded in everything you do, not as kind of an optional add-on and so
yeah,
on.
yeah.
And I guess finally, I've taken so much from you for my personal life because I do like to drive cars quite fast, as I know you do. And there's so much in what you've said that resonates with me, even on a personal level.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I wish we could have another couple of hours, but maybe another day. But thank
Pleasure.
you so much.
Thank
It
you
was
very
a
much.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dave.
Thank you.